appreciate you joining me to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really excited about it. So today we're going to talk about one of the hot political topics. I hate it that it's political, but it's it certainly is. We're going to talk about the status of race relations in the United States.
Absolutely.
Um, and again, I appreciate you joining me to talk about. It's a very volatile subject, so I appreciate you being willing and open to talk about it. I think more people need to talk about it.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me and having a dialogue. I mean, I think that's part of the problem, right? Is most people don't have the dialogue.
That's
And once you do that, if you're open-minded person, you can at least listen to what somebody view is from another point of view and see where they're coming from. So no, this needs to happen more often, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this would probably solve most things because I think, me and you talk, for a while now. I mean, we've got very similar kind of upbringing, right? Sports and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's kind of our whole life, and we didn't have some of those same issues that maybe some people did because when you're athletic, you got to play with the guy next to you,
right.
So, hey, let's go.
Yeah, that's
and,
right.
and sports has always been one of those bridges, I think, for most people. Not always, but in general, it has been. So, I think this is definitely good for us, and hopefully, some other people will gain something from it as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. One of the topics I want to start with, that is kind of out of the gate,
Hmm.
is, and I think it's a really good place to start, is I hear, you know, I hear a lot, but one of the things that a lot of people say is that racism is taught,
Hmm.
and there's actually scientific information to challenge that. Now, and I don't want to say that it isn't taught, because it certainly is taught.
Hmm.
Um, but there's evidence that shows that babies are naturally prejudiced. There's been studies done. One of them, I saw I think it was a 60-minute special several years ago, where they had done a scientific study, and I know that there's another one that was done by the Ontario Institute for
Hmm.
Studies in Education in conjunction with the University of Toronto.
Hmm.
And they found that when they put these babies through tests, that babies typically chose their own color.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is, in my opinion, is that it's an evolutionary feature, right? Thousands of years ago, when you were with your tribe, if you saw a tribe of people that looked, dressed, acted differently than you, it probably meant certain death.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
this is a time when a group of nomads would roll in, and
Right.
they kill everyone and take everything.
Right.
And so that would be an understandable natural instinct
Hmm.
for people to automatically have that. It's a safety feature.
Hmm.
You know something's not right
Right.
with the people you're around, and it could mean danger.
Hmm.
And I think we don't think about things like that because we don't live in that world.
Hmm.
To a great
Right.
extent, things are a lot different.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to really start this conversation with that basis, that there is something inherent within us,
Hmm.
and it's only, it's a lizard brain thing, right? It's the not thinking part of your brain. It's the reactionary part.
Hmm.
It's the animalistic part.
Hmm.
And then, but to take that the next step, humans have a divine gift of consciousness,
Hmm.
that we have the ability to stop at that point and rationally think a problem through, factor the problem through, and then realize that we don't need to be afraid. We don't need to do that. Unfortunately, there's a vast majority of the human population that seems to only be using a small fraction of that gift. And there are people that are preying upon that and
Hmm.
teaching, and they teach the racism. They take that a step farther, and they use that for division and for power.
Yeah. So DNA, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. And I would agree with you to the extent that I do think you have some innate ability to identify with your own tribe, if you will, so to speak, right? Uh, uh, when you're born, I think you know who your mother is. I think she's carried you for 9 months or whatever, and I think there's definitely some connection. I know being a father, I'm sure like you, like me, you talk to your baby in the womb, so you kind of identify. They're used to your voice, they're used to who you are. Uh, those kinds of things. So I think there's some truth in that. Um, but even when the civil rights movement was going and they were doing testing with dolls, with elementary school kids, and the black kids all chose the white doll as what was good as opposed to what was bad, right? They
Right.
did similar kind of testing, but it, it was really a learned behavior
That's right.
because they were taught that black is bad, white is good. Um, eh, but I agree with you. There are definitely some natural selection in choosing your own people, but I think racism as a whole is taught because I've seen kids who are different backgrounds, different complexions all the way, and have no idea that they're different from the other kid.
Yeah.
So in those situations, I think, obviously their parents have taught them that, that's just another girl or another boy. And yes, he may have blonde hair or he may have dark hair. It's just another kid, just like you. And then there are most people who are teaching things a little differently. So uh, I don't know. I'd want to dig down a little more into the we're born with a little bit of that. I don't know enough to say one way or the other, but I think most of what I've seen in my experience is from people being taught.
Now, I don't disagree with that at all. And the study that you're talking about with the dolls,
Yeah.
they happen with children who had enough time with
Yeah.
their parents
Right.
to be taught, or
Right.
for that initial inborn prejudice
Yeah.
to be reinforced.
Right.
So we're talking
Yeah.
about a seed that's being watered, because we do have that divine ability that even though we may have that that prejudice that we're born with, and it isn't a black and white prejudice.
Right. Right. Right.
It's
Right. Absolutely.
just something's different from
Yes.
what I am, from my
Right.
environment, and that could
Absolutely.
mean I want to be. And so, in that instance, those kids were no doubt taught that
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
in the system. And we can even look back at Native Americans, for example, several hundreds of years ago when they came here, and when white people came here, and they taught their kids that they were savages, and those
Right.
kids just grew up thinking that they were less than people, and that was certainly taught without a doubt. Um, so we're on the same page there. I by no means
Right. No.
mean
No. 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 No.
excuse
No.
about
Yeah.
racism.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know
Yeah.
you know that. I just want to be clear.
Right. Right.
um,
Right.
Yeah, that it's a complex problem. It's
Right.
something that we're biologically have within us from
Yes.
an animalistic standpoint, that we have to consciously work our way out of,
Right.
or raise our children to
hmm
to work their way out of
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I know we're talking about racism here a lot, but I mean, it's also the same thing with like good and bad, right? What is good and what is bad, and you teach your children at a very young age something is bad. They don't know what good and bad is. They have no
it.
idea. They just know, okay, that's interesting. Let me go touch it. Like,
Yeah,
hey, that's hot. Don't do that. They don't know
yeah,
what that means until they touch it and then they realize it's hot. I
yeah,
won't do that again, right? I mean, so like you said, there are things in us that we just don't know, and we have to learn some kind of way, but we also do have some things, and that's why I said I agree with you to a degree that there's definitely something within us, and we need to foster that, in the best way possible, right?
yeah. And
That's what we're talking about.
I think the reason that's important is because if you accuse someone of being racist,
hmm
their first instinct is to defend themselves.
Right.
and they'll no longer hear anything you said.
Right. Right.
But if we can get people to understand that there's something in all of us
Mm-hmm.
that pre-programs us to be susceptible to that,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can point out there are things in society, in the system that we've grown up with, there's things that we've automatically through intergenerational teachings we've learned to accept that we never realized they themselves were prejudiced or racist. Then I think people will be more apt to have this conversation. But I know people, and I want to get into this a little bit later, but I think that there are several types of people, and when it comes to this, I mean, first of all, we have evil, angry, racist people
Mm-hmm.
who are just full of hatred.
Right.
That they exist, right? We have people who are unaware that they're biased and they're racist.
Right.
You know, they kind of live in denial. We have
Mm-hmm.
people who just aren't really racist and wouldn't treat you differently unless you made them angry, and then
Right.
they would use whatever they could against you.
Right.
Which doesn't mean they don't like you because you're black. It means that they would insult you because you're black. The same way they would insult someone else who made them angry that because they were overweight or
Right.
because they were tall or
Right.
whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, they just got issues, but I
Right.
don't know that they're inherently racist.
Right.
You got people who are aware and
Mm-hmm.
who are trying to do the right thing, and then you have people who I think are kind of go overboard, and they go way left the other way, and I think cause more problems than it's worth. But we're not going to talk about those people today. But what I want to talk about are people who look. You and I aren't going to solve we're not going to fix many people who are just evil racist bastards. That's not
Right.
going to happen today.
Right.
What I want to focus on are the people who are living in a system that aren't aware that they have inherent biases,
Mm-hmm.
and that the people who just don't know. They live their life and they gauge everything on their life, and they don't know what you've been through.
Right.
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 And my perspective is a little different than those people because I've coached. Well, first of all, my grandmother, she died 3 months shy of her 100th birthday, and she was the precinct committee chairperson for the Democratic Party in her highly conservative county for 81 years. From the time she was 18 until she died when she was 99.
Wow.
She's a remarkable woman. She wanted to go to medical school in 1918 in Indiana, and they wouldn't let her because she was a woman. Comes from a family of doctors and lawyers, unbelievably intelligent, very liberal in thinking, and so I have a lot of influence from her. I grew up. My kids played athletics. I coached a lot of inner city kids. I've hundreds of both white and black kids that I've coached everywhere for a long time, and we adopted our adopted son, who unfortunately passed away. He was black, so I have a different perspective than most white people in my position.
Sure.
I don't know what it's like to be black. I'll never ever pretend that I do, but I do have some insight because of those. You walk into a truck stop out in the middle of nowhere with 5 black kids, you figure out real quick that they need to get their stuff and they need to get back in the car. You know, you're not in a good place.
Yep. Let's not wait around.
No.
It's so funny because I've driven across country, believe it or not, probably about 8 times, right? And I just recently drove from Chicago to North Carolina. So getting out at those places where you're the only black person, it's like, let's get on. Let's get on with it. Get in and get out. And then some places you stop at, and and not that any place was bad. I'm not even suggesting that, but you do have some places you go to and you have this sense of, what's he doing here?
Yeah.
Not from here. You need to hurry up and get what you're getting and get on, and you can feel that right away. And it's an interesting feeling to have when serving in the military, traveling all over the world, doing all these things I've done. You think when you're at home, the United States of America, you should be okay. That's what you would think.
Yeah.
It's in complete complete candor, I probably feel safer in other countries than I do in the United States.
Wow. That's
That's
pretty
that's
remarkable.
that's just. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, now there are some places in the United States I feel truly comfortable, but with things that go on that you see on TV, I mean, that's always a concern. And I've been in other countries and never had that concern whatsoever, never.
Wow.
And here, at any given moment, at any given moment, you can be pulled over for little to nothing,
Yeah.
and your life is at the hands of what that officer is feeling that day, or his character or her character, right? I
Right.
mean, because obviously I know a lot of good police officers. I mean, I was in the military. I know law enforcement. I know federal law enforcement. I know local law enforcement. I know a lot of good people. But it only takes one.
It only takes one. That's
you
exactly what I
know,
was getting ready to say. And
you know.
and it's that one that's out looking for
Yep,
the trouble.
yep, right, right. And it doesn't matter if you're doing anything right or wrong. It's going to be a problem. You know.
No, yeah.
So,
There's a story I just saw the other day. What were these guys' names? Jameel. They were in Benton Harbor, Michigan.
mm-hmm,
It was Jameel. I can't remember his last name, and I think the police officer was Andrew Wilson.
mm-hmm,
And the police officer set him up and sent him, and he went to prison
mm-hmm,
4 years. And the police officer came back later and admitted that he intentionally had set him up.
mm-hmm,
And so the guy was exonerated and released, and then the cop was fired.
mm-hmm.
And they're now friends actually, and they travel around the country speaking about racism. But
Wow.
I haven't seen this guy talk a whole lot, but I have my prior life is in public safety. I mean, I was a firefighter. I
Right.
lived in that realm, and I can tell you, I mean, you got guys that, they get big busts, they're going to get promotions, they're going to get accommodations, that kind of
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
You get the guys that join the police department
Yep.
just for a power trip,
Yep.
just to be that way. People who are racist,
Mm-hmm.
people, and I want to defend police officers for a second, because
Yeah.
I also know a lot of really good cops, a lot of great people.
Yeah. No,
But
absolutely.
when you take a human being and you deal with the scourge of the earth
Sure.
all day, every day,
Sure.
you become jaded.
Yeah.
Your view on life and human beings becomes really twisted,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not enough emotional and mental health support for police officers for that reason, in my opinion.
Right. Now that's a very good point, and I'll agree with you on that too, because when you're experiencing trauma, as much as a police officer does, because like we experience trauma in the military, and everybody's now labeled with PTSD, right? Every situation is PTSD. So okay, maybe I can give you that, and if that's the case, then you probably need some kind of help.
Yeah.
And if
But
you're
getting
not
help is a
getting it,
stigma.
right? No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It affects all your masculinity
Yep.
for men. I don't know what the right word is for women, but for men, it's definitely all your masculinity that you go get help. I mean, it's like, oh no, you can't. You're a man. Be tough. Suck it up. And
Yeah. And it goes in your professional file, right?
absolutely does. Absolutely
Used against
does.
you later on.
You can lose your security clearance, if they think you're mentally unstable. Now, that doesn't mean you're mentally unstable. It means, you got an issue. You need to talk to somebody to help you work through it. But your security clearance is on the line. Your job is on the line. So of course, nobody's going to say, I got a problem. I need help. Nobody's saying that,
Yeah.
because they want to keep their job. They want to, keep providing for their families or whatever. And I mean, it's a tough situation. So I think in those situations, though, like you were saying, police officers probably need a lot more help than they're getting, right? Because if you're in that environment constantly and then you become jaded, you can't be, because the next person you meet really might need your help. And
That's
you
right.
can't base that on, well, the last time I came here, it was a criminal and, I had to arrest him. Everybody's not going to be a criminal. Everybody's not
Right.
going to be bad. So you got to look at each situation individually, but it's hard to do that when, like you said, that repetitiveness and then your mindset has changed, and you have to look at, how you look at things. So, yeah, but then, we talk about time to do those things, right? And the stigma that comes along with that. The real issue is the money, right? Because who's paying for it, right? Because now you got to pay, the police officer has to pay therapy, right? So does that come out of the police officer's budget? Does that come out of the state budget? How does that? And then now we're talking a whole different game
Right.
when you start talking about money, right? Because we all know at the end of the day, it's always about the money.
It's always
Always.
about money. It's always. Now that makes me wonder with the calls to defund the police, which I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about that too.
Yeah, they don't know what that means. Yeah, I
No, they
agree.
don't.
Yeah,
Defund the police does not mean shut the police department down.
yeah.
I
No,
know
that's definitely not what
there
it
are
means.
people who are selling that narrative for political purposes. But
Well, yeah, that's that, and again, what is that about? That's about money, right?
yeah,
Well, I need votes. Oh, if you do that, then you're gonna have lawlessness. So vote for me,
that's
and
right.
I'll make sure. And again, that's not even what that means. But like you said, it's a narrative somebody's trying to sell.
Yeah, yeah. So defund the police actually means to take a lot of the money that you're giving to the police department to hire
Mhm.
so many
Right,
policemen, all right,
right,
and to militarize and to
right.
weaponize the police
Yep,
department.
yep.
And you take a chunk of that money and you
Hmm.
don't have as many police officers and
Hmm.
you hire social workers
Yep,
and
yep,
mental health people and
yep,
you get
yep,
you invest in community programs, those type things,
yep.
and or cross-train police officers,
Right.
maybe have police officers who have a
Yep.
social working background or a
Hmm.
psychology background,
Yep.
and you try to take, so you're actually alleviating a lot of the burden from the cops.
Yes.
My
Yes.
sister yesterday, or my sister, my daughter yesterday at
Hmm.
work had, and this is a white guy, so it seems like it's not relevant, but it's completely relevant.
Hmm.
This older gentleman came into where she works.
Hmm.
She said that he was all beaten up and scarred up, and he
Hmm.
was malnourished and dehydrated,
Hmm.
and he had a band on his wrist from the hospital. He's wearing hospital socks. Said he
Hmm.
had his social security checks in a plastic grocery bag that he couldn't even cash because he didn't have any ID, and he
Hmm.
had $50 cash loose in the bag.
Hmm.
She said, come to find out, they were talking to him and got him some water and trying to
Hmm.
get him food, and he had just come from the hospital,
Hmm.
and he was bipolar, didn't have any ID, didn't have anywhere to go, didn't have any family, and
Hmm.
the only place he could go was to a homeless shelter that he was complaining was abusing him. I don't know if they were or not. He
Hmm.
admitted he was bipolar. Obviously,
Right.
there's some kind of an issue.
Right.
They had to call the police. The police had to come. They were trying to figure out what to do with this guy. They ended up putting him in a cab, and the cab
Hmm.
took him to the homeless shelter.
Hmm.
Okay. The bottom line is you defund the police, you take some of the money and you put it into the system where you call somebody who can come help that person.
Right.
The
Right.
police don't have to get
Right.
involved. They
Right.
don't have to
Right.
lock the guy up and take him to
Right.
jail or
Right.
whatever the case
Right.
may be.
Right.
You get him some help and you
Right.
alleviate the pressure off the police. That's a perfect example of what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
No, absolutely, 1,000%. That is exactly what we're talking about. Because you still want police officers to do police work. You still want that. I mean,
That's right.
protecting and serving. There's a reason for it. That's why we have it. So, absolutely, they need to be out there doing police work. But that's not a police issue, in my opinion. Now, I know some people may disagree with that, but like you said, if you had funds for other people to support them in those kinds of actions, then that would take a lot of burden off them.
It would.
They're not therapists. They're not
Right.
mental health workers. They don't know any more than you or I know. Okay, let's call somebody.
That's
Oh,
right.
you need to call the right person, right? Instead
Call the
of
right person.
wasting your time. I shouldn't say wasting your time, but not being as effective as you could be because you're dealing with something that's really not your lane.
That's
You
right.
don't have the experience for it. Now, like I said, if somebody was on the force who had that experience, then okay, hey, Officer Smith has this kind of background. We can send him to this call, let him, figure out what needs to happen. Okay, cool, no
That's right.
problem. But
Yeah.
no, I'm with you. We're definitely on the same page with that,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. So I would also like to add that I I do know that police will pull they will pull black people over if they're in the wrong neighborhood
Yeah.
because there aren't black people that live in that neighborhood
Yep.
and a black person drives through and they don't understand why they're there.
Yep.
Now, part of that is part of that goes back to what I was saying a minute ago. Part of it goes from that they don't fit the demographic that there's a whole long reason. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter why. I just want to make it clear that
Mm-hmm.
I know I've had police officers admit to me that they do that.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It does happen.
Yep.
There are a lot of people out here that say, "Oh, that never happens." You know,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
think people are making up. No, it does. It does really happen.
Yeah. No, it does. It's funny. I had this guy uh used to work with, and we were in the gym working out. So me, this black guy I was working out with, and then this white guy who was working with us. We were all working out at lunchtime, right? And he was asking us some questions about black and white and stuff. And no big deal. I mean, just having conversation. And he had something similar to what we were just talking about being pulled over and things of those natures. Like, do those things really happen? Like, yes,
Yeah,
all the time. And he just couldn't fathom that that was a real thing. It's kind of like what you said before. He's one of those people who, very nice guy, very very open guy, no racist kind of thing in his body, but he just couldn't understand it because he wasn't like that. He just couldn't understand that those things really happen. I'm like, well, maybe you've been in a sheltered place, maybe
yeah,
you grew up in a place where you didn't have those issues, so of course you wouldn't know anything about it. But for people who've had that experience, it's a little different. You see things a little differently. And he was definitely one of those people that just couldn't imagine. And the funny thing was, he had a mentor who was a black female, and they were really good friends, and he was telling us all this stuff, and it was great. But it's like, well, okay, so if you're this person and you've never had these experiences, and people are telling you these things are really happening, I I don't know how to help you see what you've never seen.
yeah.
That's kind of my problem, right? I mean, I don't know. I can only tell him the things I've experienced, right? And if he can't believe that really, and I mean, he wasn't calling me a liar or nothing like that, but just like, I just can't believe that those things happen. I'm like, yeah, you live in America, man. It's great in a lot of things, but there are a lot of things that we're not great at.
Yeah.
And you have to accept those things and work to change them in your own little world. And
Yeah,
if you can change them in your own little world, then that's all we can ask. I'm not asking
that's
you to go out
exactly
there
right.
and save the world. I mean, I think one person can have a great impact, but maybe that person is not you, and that's fine. You don't have to be that person. Uh, but within your own sphere of influence, just keep doing what you're doing then. Just keep being a good person, and
Yeah,
treat people based on their character, and I think you're fine. I don't ask anybody to go out there and march and talk about Black Lives Matter. I mean, you don't have to do that. I'm not asking anybody to do that. Just treat people fairly, just like you would want to be treated. As long as you can do that, then we're good.
yeah, yeah. That falls into the old if you can't help them, then at least don't hurt them
Right,
category.
right. And that's I call it people sticking their head in the sand, right? And
Yeah,
just I don't know anything. I don't know. We're we're all too old for that. I mean,
yeah,
really, we're all too old for that. Don't
yeah.
if you don't want to be involved, that's fine. Don't be involved. It can't make you be involved, but to I don't know. I was so blown away because I mean we're a lot older now. We're not 20 anymore. So it's just amazing that he could not see that these things were real. And
Yeah.
I mean, I understand he never personally had the experience, but then how many people do you really know and talk about these things to? Because in my mind, you're not really having a real conversation, even if it's even if you live in a sheltered world, a sheltered space, right? Where you have your family, your few friends, and you never had a conversation about any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Man, that just sounds strange to me. It
Yeah.
sounds strange.
I think, you know, we can only digest and see things from our own perspective,
Yeah, no,
based
absolutely.
on the experiences we've had. And many people, life is a delusion. We're,
Yes.
we are all delusional to some degree, and it takes work,
Yeah.
it takes effort to work out of that delusion. And you know, about 15 years ago, my life radically changed, and I
Hmm.
started I started I started doing what I call leveling up,
Hmm.
and I started educating myself. And
Yeah.
I mean, I dove deep, and I started digging
Hmm.
deep into human behavior and psychology and all
Hmm.
kinds of things. And at first I was like, man, this is cool. I'm figuring out, I'm figuring it out. And then I realized the more I figured out, the more there was to figure out. Yeah. And I realized I'll never know everything.
Yeah.
There's just no
Yeah.
way to do that.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
I think education in its own right brings you to a certain level, that the point of education is to bring you to that point, to always stop and realize you don't know everything there is to know in the situation, and there
Yeah.
can be something you can learn. And so you stop and you listen. I
Yeah.
think that's the key that you're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things is listening, and that we can carry that all across all kinds of spectrums, right? Listening it is the most underutilized tool that we have. Everybody wants to talk, but nobody wants to listen. And I don't mean just hear. I want you to listen.
Right.
And if we could get more people to actually do that, man, we could do a whole lot of things with
Yeah.
that. But yeah,
It would solve
listening.
all the problems. It really
Yeah,
would.
100%. You had no argument with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
So I
argument.
want to, real quick, I want to kind of shift gears, and I want to talk about systemic racism. And
Okay.
there's a lot of debate about this. I know that there are a lot of really smart people out there that
Mm-hmm.
have videos that they've debunked their systemic racism, which I probably should listen to. I haven't listened to because I know there is, and I know why. And I want to kind of start talking a little bit through the historical aspect of this, and
Mm-hmm.
then it'll probably bring us right back around to where we were. But
Mm-hmm.
um, there's some historical things that I think that people aren't really aware of,
Yeah.
um, from a systemic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that people don't realize is that when this country was founded, the first prejudice there was naturally, because they became natural enemies. When you had one group of people move into another people's territory, there
Mm-hmm.
was naturally tension, which ended up in war and death.
Mm-hmm.
So at that, you had white people versus people of color, the Native Americans. They had
Mm-hmm.
darker skin.
Right.
And so I think that set the stage for everything, right then
Mm-hmm.
and there, right? So
Yeah.
you had, in Europe, you have different shades of white people, and they could have alliances, they could shift around. But when you came here,
Yep.
when Europeans came here,
Yep.
there were white people and there were not white people, and it was a
Yep.
very distinct difference
Yep.
when it happened,
Yep.
and it set the stage.
Yep.
Some initially, and there's a myth on the internet as well, you see on social media, about white slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a complete myth. There is
Yeah.
something to that.
Yeah.
Initially slavery in the United States started with, it wasn't even the United States, so in North America,
Mm-hmm.
started with the natives.
Mm-hmm.
That's your first logical
Right.
step there.
Mm-hmm.
They started bringing over prisoners, convicts from Europe, and they
Mm-hmm.
started bringing over poor Catholics, particularly the Irish.
Mm-hmm.
And you had some other poor people that were indentured servants,
Right.
which is a ridiculous quote, because they came over to a land where there were two types of people. There were people who had all the power and the wealth, and the other people who did what they were told.
Right.
And your living conditions were subject to the people who were telling you what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
if you came over as an indentured servant, and your master
Yeah.
was not a very nice person, he didn't have to let you go, because you couldn't call the police and say, hey, my contract's up. You couldn't get an attorney.
Right.
So what happened was, initially there was, and then there was some there was some Africans in that mix, but a very, very small percentage at the beginning. And then something happened in Virginia called Bacon's Rebellion, where a very powerful, rich, powerful landowner named Nathaniel Bacon, he had a squabble with the governor of Jamestown, and Nathaniel Bacon, he started an uprising. He went to the slaves and he got the slaves to revolt against the governor, trying to make the governor look bad. And the revolt got out of hand. Slaves, they burned a lot of property, and I think they actually may have killed some of the wealthy members at that time. Again, there were really only two classes. You know, you had the ultra wealthy and you had the people that were working the land. And then once they quelled the rebellion, they got together and they said, we can't have this anymore. You know, we can't have this type of thing, this cooperation. So what they did was they passed a series of laws that did a couple things. The first thing it did is that anyone who was white and in any type of servitude could be granted their freedom. They could buy their freedom or work their way out of the freedom, and then they could have rights, including owning land. And on the flip side, it said that anyone of African descent could be given their freedom, but they could not own land. And though anyone who was white and a slave, once their master died, they were automatically freed. Anyone who was of African descent was now inheritable property. And so what they did is they slightly elevated poor whites above blacks.
Right.
And they started throwing them scraps from the table. And they started whispering in their ear, you tell me if they're getting out of line and we'll come fix it, because we're the same, you and I. And that has set the stage for the next 400 years right there. Yeah, that's exactly what we see today. Because ironically, I know a lot of people, and this is a little bit off really race. It doesn't, but I know people who think that, and you do too, a lot of people who make $50,000 a year that look down on people that make $20,000.
Yeah.
And I actually got into an argument or a debate with a guy about, you know, he was telling me how hard he's worked for everything he has, and people are lazy and they just want something for nothing and they should get a job or whatever. This guy only made $50,000 a year. He's one disaster from being bankrupt. You know, many people are.
Yeah.
You're at $50,000 a year. You're a hell of a lot closer to $20,000 a year than you are to $250,000.
Yeah.
And I don't think people understand that because of the systemic system, because of the way the system was designed after Bacon's Rebellion, which set the stage for the rest of history.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's been one of the greatest divides that have happened to help this country that we live in. I mean, you know, like I said, it was kind of haves and have nots, and then there was this level. There was, yeah, I know, it definitely still is. But then there was this extra layer just to separate just enough, like, oh, you're like us, but not quite. So you stay down there, but you're more like us than them. So, and of course, we're better than them. You know, that's that mentality, right? And so that's where.
Well, and I think that statement really is, when they say you're better than them.
Yes.
You know, somebody's.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a puppet master, man, pulling the strings.
Absolutely. And that's why we have most of the things we have today. Me and you see that so clearly together.
And I think rational people do. That's.
Yeah.
But we've reached a point of irrationality in this country. I mean, it is. It's out of control. I don't even know how. I mean, I'm trying. That's why we're having this conversation. I'm trying to get it back. If you set any rational person down and had a discussion with any other rational person, no matter their backgrounds, they all want the same thing.
Yeah.
They want a warm place, a warm, clean place to sleep. They want food in their belly. They want to take care of their kids. They want to
Yep.
watch Netflix. They want to
Yep.
have drive a car.
Yep.
We all want the same
Yep.
things,
Absolutely.
but it's the things that we don't have in common. We have
Yep.
90% of the things we have in common. It's
Mhm.
that 10% they take and
Yep.
they use against us.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I've said something pretty much verbatim to what you said, and again, being in the military, I've traveled quite a few places and seen quite a different level of quality of life in all kinds of places. From extremely wealthy to extreme poverty. Right? I've seen it all, and everybody wants the same thing. Everybody does. They
Everybody.
want love. They want to take care of their family. I'll even throw in they want to go on holiday because everybody wants a little vacation,
That's
right?
right.
And they want their children to do better and have better than they did. And that's it. I mean, you,
Good.
you want love and you want to give love and you want to receive love. That's it, man.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
mean, do some people want to be rich? Yeah, some people don't. Some people don't want the headache, right? But the basic things, we all want the same things.
That's right.
And so it doesn't make sense for me to be angry because you want the same thing that I want. I mean, why? why is it a problem if you have the same thing that I have?
Because someone who has 100 million times more than you have
Yeah.
is telling you that that person's trying to take your stuff.
Yeah.
It's ironic.
So let's I know we're a little tangent, but let's ride it while we're on it though.
Okay.
So just like that, when we talk about people taking jobs, this is the greatest farce I've ever heard. Oh, they're taking your jobs. No, they're not. Because if you were doing those jobs wouldn't be taken.
That's
And
right.
and for the most part, most jobs are going overseas because they get it for cheaper labor and they make more profit. But
Okay.
we
Yeah,
we
we are
we
going on a tangent, but we're going to ride this one. You're right.
because I mean, we talk about, so if you want to get into, like the guy said, oh, they don't want to work, they want something for nothing, blah blah blah. So there are more white people on welfare than black people, right? But there are more white people, so I mean, obviously the numbers are just gonna relate that way. But the percentages is a higher percentage of black people, right? Because it's less of us, but it's quite a few people. But that don't mean people don't want to work. Maybe people can't find work, or maybe
Right.
people, which what I've learned over the course of my life is people don't want to move. People want to stay where they're at, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
grow up, you were born, you grow up, you don't want to leave. That's where you want to stay. So if factories have closed down and moved away, gone overseas, which is where most of them have gone,
Right.
there aren't those same kind of jobs to employ the entire community. And then if you don't get the higher education, then you can't get the better job. So you kind of got to do that skilled labor kind of workforce. If those jobs are gone, you're going to be looking for that handout. Well, it's a lot of people looking for that handout because they don't want to move. If you move, you can probably find a job somewhere else. Don't want to move? And like I said, these companies are sending all these jobs overseas because they're getting it made cheaper. It's easier to send the work to China and get a Chinese factory who has all their people that are employed living at the place where they work,
That's
so
right.
they can call them any point in time. Hey, we need 1,000,000 widgets. Get up, go make 1,000,000 widgets right now, and
Yep.
that's what they do.
So the
And people don't know
shareholder,
that.
so the
People don't
people
know that.
who own stock in the company can make
Yep,
more money, and they in
absolutely.
turn repay the CEO
Yep,
$114 million a year
yep,
be, in favor. And
yep,
meanwhile, the jobs have gone overseas. You don't have
yep,
people, so they can pay
yep,
somebody $1.50 an hour rather
yep.
than pay somebody $15 an hour.
Right,
People don't
absolutely.
see that,
Nope.
and people are cutting their own throats shopping
Yep.
at places like Walmart.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's a joke. And the thing, and again, back to this going off in the space here, but I got to kind of say it. But, so the president,
Yeah,
all his things are made overseas.
they're made
He's talking
overseas.
about, he ran on the platform of made in America and making things in America.
I know.
But none of his companies and none of his friends' companies are making stuff in America.
No.
And then the people, his base, who voted for him, like, you can't blame other groups of people for you not having a job when all the jobs are gone overseas because all these businessmen that say they're gonna do stuff for you or
Yeah,
cutting
yeah,
you
yeah,
off. You
yeah.
don't even. It
I
just
remember
blows
my
my mind.
grandmother. I remember my grandmother in the early '80s.
Mm-hmm.
She worked at General Motors in
Right.
Indianapolis. I remember her then telling me that we were headed for a real problem when they started bringing Japanese cars in
Mm-hmm.
the United States.
Yep.
Um, and there was a movie came out with Michael Keaton called Gung Ho about it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
And
Yep. Yep.
and I and I remember that watching that happen. I remember her bringing my attention
Mm-hmm.
to it at a very young age and watching it happen. And then
Yep.
everyone going to Walmart and Walmart exploding into the superstores and
Right.
everything that was made in there was came out of China because
Right.
and that's when the jobs started rolling
Yep.
overseas. And it
Yep.
was corporations.
Yep.
It that's and the corporations are running the government. They're
Mm-hmm. Oh
lobbying.
yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
we have a multifaceted
Yep.
problem. I mean,
Yep.
we're getting away from the racial discussion, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's extremely important because it all boils down to the haves versus the have-nots,
Right.
and
Right.
that they're programming this system to keep
Mm-hmm.
you and I divided because we have different skin color,
Right.
despite the fact that we're fighting. We should be on the same side,
Right.
fighting the
Right.
lobbyists,
Right.
fighting the politicians,
Right.
sending the jobs overseas,
Right.
and they're making all their money, and
Yep.
they're leaving us to fight over scraps.
Yep. And that's what we're doing, and that's the problem.
It's
They,
exploitation, worker
they
exploitation.
oh, absolutely. They make racism our issue when money is the real issue.
That's right.
You know, and like you said, they keep us worried about stuff that really, I'm not gonna say it doesn't matter because it does, but stuff that shouldn't be the important things. You know, and the jobs and the opportunities are going somewhere else, and nobody's talking about that.
Yeah.
We're sitting here talking about things that truly to me are important. Don't get me wrong, and I will never downplay the struggle that we have because we have one that's been going on for 400 years plus. So you know,
Yeah.
I am never downplaying that, but without the economics to support any of this, it doesn't happen. And the thing has always been this. Is what I always tell people, and of course, I'm pretty sure you can understand where I'm going, but always, always, always follow the money because
Always.
all this stuff that's happening now. So yes, we got COVID-19. Yes, we got some of the biggest racial protesting going on in the history of this country. How many people are making money through all this devastation that all of us regular folks, you know, are going through? How many people are making money? It's a few people that's making billions
Yeah.
right now because of all this nonsense.
You better believe it.
And they rather us to keep doing what we're doing, you know, fighting, protesting, bickering, while the money is sitting over here, changing hands, and they're just getting richer. I
That's
mean,
exactly right.
it's phenomenal the stuff that's going on, and
It's phenomenal.
I
And
just
and both sides of politics are involved.
oh yeah, they're
They're in
all on
bed
the same
together.
team.
They're fighting over different industries. That's what people
Yeah,
don't realize.
yeah, yes, yes,
It's a different wing of the same bird.
yep,
The
yep,
Democrats are fighting for these industries,
yep,
and the Republicans are fighting for these industries.
yes,
And they
yes,
get in and change policy back and forth,
yep,
like with the ACA. Now, I do believe that there are politicians, probably on both sides, that mean well based on how they view things,
sure,
and they're really trying to get good legislation in. I
sure,
think there are people that want to get health coverage for people, but I
sure,
do also think that the health coverage issue involves a lot of insurance companies who stand to gain a lot of money.
yes,
And
oh, absolutely,
yeah, so I mean, and you have to weigh that out because
mm-hmm.
when you solve a problem at a national scale or a global
Yeah,
scale, somebody's going to profit from
yeah,
it. You know?
yeah, yeah,
So it's not all they're not all evil, but
right,
the predominantly
yeah,
most politicians on both ends are doing nothing but repaying favors for the people
yep,
who donate money to get them into
yep,
office. That's the way the system
absolutely,
works. And until
absolutely,
we, what is it called? Citizens United, I think,
mm-hmm.
is the lobbying bill that we need to get overturned. Bernie
Mm-hmm.
Sanders talks about it a lot.
Yeah,
That allows just ungodly amounts of money being pumped in by
yep,
corporations to the federal government. We need to cut that down. Corporations are actually, we talked a little bit about it, but
mm-hmm. Yeah,
the corporations are actually going to be the downfall of this country. They're destroying this country.
Yeah, I think maybe so we don't keep, getting too far off here. I think we might have to have another discussion about this because we could have another long conversation about that. And
Oh, good.
I definitely got some things to say about that. But so yeah, let's try to refocus back on where we were going
Yeah,
here.
for
So
sure.
back to systemic racism, right? So yeah,
So,
it's so funny though that I've even seen in social media, and maybe you have too. You said something about people not believing it existed. And I mean, that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. That somebody say it doesn't exist. It, this country was built on it. I
right,
mean, just flat out bottom line. I mean, yeah. We have a Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was for rich white male landowners. It was for nobody else.
right.
Let's not even beat around the bush about that. It wasn't. And
Which is another probably something we need to talk about in the next one,
yeah.
because it was a bunch of businessmen that were getting tired of paying taxes to a king, and they were like, "We got control of this. They need us more than we need them because we got all the natural resources." That's all it was. It wasn't because they wanted you and I to have freedom.
Yeah,
That they
no,
wanted.
no, no,
They
no,
saw an
no, no.
opportunity.
It was money. It was all about the money.
All about the
That's
money.
all it was.
Now,
That's all it ever was.
I do believe to a great extent they believed in what they were doing. I don't mean to take that away from them. I mean,
Sure.
I think you get a cause,
Yeah.
you get a cause. And you're like, hey,
Yep.
we can do this, and then you're like, hey, we can do something really cool with this. And
Mhm.
I believe that people had their right mind and heart in it.
Mhm.
Times were different.
Sure.
I know a lot of people with Thomas Jefferson,
Mhm.
who was a slave owner.
Yep.
I don't mean to exonerate the man at
Right.
all,
Right.
but he did write a renunciation of slavery into the I don't think into the original Bill of Rights, and it caused a
Yeah.
nasty argument,
Yeah.
and he was forced to take it out by some other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
I think that's a fascinating point if you look at history and how
Yeah.
that could have played out.
Mhm.
If they left that in there, obviously, then there would have been work to do
Yeah.
to to do to abolish slavery at that
Right.
point, which would have
Right.
been 80 80 years earlier.
Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't happen, but I still think that's fascinating.
Yeah. No. There are, and just like there are now, there are decisions that are made that if they could have gone the other way, things would be. You couldn't even imagine how different things could be.
Yeah,
And only thing we can say is we'll never know because the
yeah,
decision was made the way it was, and that's all we
yeah.
can do.
And
But you're right.
the interesting point about that is to go back to Bacon's Rebellion
Mm-hmm.
that I was talking about earlier. Bacon's
Yeah.
Rebellion happened in 1676.
Mm-hmm.
So the transatlantic slave trade didn't really start until 1676 when that law was made. Then they were like, oh wow, now we can hand
Mm-hmm.
our slaves down to our families.
Yeah.
We need African slaves. So that's
Yeah.
when that
Yeah.
demand was created.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that point, when Thomas Jefferson
Mm-hmm.
thought about putting that in there,
Yeah.
the African slave trade at that point was less than 100 years old.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when you start really looking back through history and realizing that was only 200 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and slavery was transatlantic chattel slavery was only 100 years old at that point, and then the Civil War would actually come 80 years after that. It really
Mm-hmm.
breaks it down into small chunks
Mm-hmm.
that you can really see how it started to grow and get out of
Mm-hmm.
control,
Yeah.
right? And we
Yeah.
know that that mob mentality.
Yeah.
Nazi Germany is a great example of good people buying into something really horrible,
Right. Right.
right?
I mean, yeah.
That's a good example for people. When we talk about slavery here, people get defensive because they're like, I'm American and I'm not
Yeah.
racist or
Yeah.
whatever. Look at Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
I I grew up thinking, how in the hell did that happen? I don't
Right. Right.
understand. Well, now I get it because I
Yeah.
see
Right. Right.
a lot of similarities happening here. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to understand that chattel slavery happened the same way. You had
Mm-hmm.
rich people that were taking advantage of other people,
Yeah.
and then other people were just born into this is how it
Mm-hmm.
is,
Yeah.
and then it continued to grow and until it got worse until
Yeah.
the end of the end of the Civil War.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand human behavior, that we, through standard deviancy, we get used to certain things and things grow. And to understand that whole timeline of how that happened, and since the Civil War, we're trying to work backwards from that. It's no doubt that Black people in America are better off today than they were in 1864. Mm-hmm. I think we could all agree on that, mm-hmm. right? We know that they're better off now, or at least I would like to think they're better off now than they were before the Civil Rights Movement, right? When you couldn't use a water fountain, had to ride the whole riding bus and that kind of thing. I think every generation, I'd like to think we're getting better. Up until now, I don't know what's happening now. I can't. But except for what I do know is these kids, these Gen Xers and these millennials, most of them aren't buying into this bullshit. But they're like, what in the world is going on? Yeah. Because they've been raised differently. And I like to think that we're going to wash this out generation by generation. Do you think that's possible?
Good question. Let me backtrack a little bit, and then I'll get to you what I think about that. I am not so sure that we're better off now than we were then. I'm not sure.
Define then.
At any point in time.
Okay.
At any point in time. I mean, obviously we're materialistically better than we were during slavery. Materialistically, we're definitely, I mean, to a certain degree, yeah, we're definitely better than we were doing civil rights. But that's materially. I don't know that we're any better morally in this country. I am not a believer that we're better morally. And I don't know that things have changed that much. I think things used to be hidden better than they are now. And I think what's happened now is that we have a racist president, and he supports and encourages racist activity. I mean, if anybody says Trump isn't a racist, I don't even know how they can fix their mouths to say that. I mean, anytime you support neo-Nazism, anytime you support building a wall, anytime you support a Muslim ban, anytime you support any of these policies that he's presented based upon only the color of people's skin, I don't know what else to say about him, but he's a racist. And I don't know that anybody can defend it. I mean, I'm up for a lot of intellectual conversation, but that ain't one you can convince me of. You know.
I agree with you. I voted Republican and I voted Democrat off and on my whole life. I believe in choosing the best candidate. I never once thought Trump was the best candidate, but I think it's become very, very clear. It's first of all, I agree with you. I think he's racist. He had his father was affiliated with KKK. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of examples in his lifetime growing up that would lead me to believe that. Mm-hmm. But if we left that aside and even just said that we don't know if he is or not, mm-hmm. right? What he's done to intentionally instill fear and create division, mm-hmm. and using reasons like mm-hmm. the immigration reason mm-hmm. to create division against Hispanic people, and mm-hmm. using the religion against mm-hmm. Or using the fear of terrorism, that type of thing, against people of a different religion who happen to have a different color skin. Mm-hmm. So even if he's only using those things for political gain, he's still contributing and exacerbating to the problem. And in my opinion, that's bad enough. Right. That whether he is or he isn't, what he's done, in my opinion, is horrible, and just creating so much division. I never thought we would be in this situation that we are now in this country. I'm really heartbroken that we're where we're at.
I never thought I would see any president support neo-Nazis in America.
Yeah,
I never thought I would see that in my life. And I don't care what color you are, but that just blows my mind.
yeah.
The,
And he's made a group called anti-fascist.
yes.
Dude, my grandfathers were anti-fascist because they carried a rifle and shot the bastards in Europe. I mean, I don't understand how we've gotten to a point where people who are against fascism are all of a sudden they're a terrorist organization. They're not even a real organization. I mean, they're just people who are against fascism because the far right, the alt-right has gone so far that direction that they're trying to fight that, and now they're the enemy. I don't understand.
Yeah, I just don't understand how he keeps giving support to these groups that just are anti-government, anti-American, anti-everything, and he just go ahead, do it. Oh, they're fine people. I'm like, what?
Fine people.
Just blows my mind. But everybody else is a thug or a criminal or not worthy or something. The words he chooses to use. I just can't. I just can't. And that's why I tell you. That's why I tell you. So to bring it back together, I don't know how much better we are when we still get dealt stuff like that, and it's still supported, and it is, and it seems to be getting a groundswell of things, right? That people. How do I say this? I don't know that racism has ever gone away. I don't think it was ever necessarily getting better. I think people got, quote unquote, more politically correct, if you will. And right now, they don't have to be. They don't have to be. They can be as vulgar and as racist as they want with no problem. Because it's president talks that way, president encourages it, it must be okay.
Yeah.
And how many people have done things in this country recently and said Donald Trump said it was okay. Donald Trump wanted me to do it. It was, and I'm not saying, maybe some of those people had some issues anyway, right? Maybe they were already a little bit off. But when you quote the president of the United States of America as your reasoning why you go out and speak and behave in such a racist and evil manner, and that's the leader of our country? No. He's doing it intentionally. Whether, like you said, whether he's racist or not, he's doing everything he's doing intentionally. Period. It is a plan. What the end game is, I'm not sure. But like I was saying before, I don't know that we've ever gotten any better. Yes, materialistically, yes, we can go to colleges. We can even go to white colleges now. That used to be a thing, right? Separate but equal, but they were never equal. Me and you can sit here and have a conversation, and we're not worried about. I hope we're not worried about the police kicking in our door for us having a conversation. Which that could have been a thing. You had a black son, that could have been a problem for you back in the day. So those kind of things. Okay. But
you make some good points. So, but I mean, one of the things that's come to light recently is Black Wall Street. That more people now know about Black Wall Street than ever. Right. And it, is it when 1921?
Somewhere around that. I don't remember dates.
And for anyone listening who doesn't know what Black Wall Street was, it was a prominent. It was in Tulsa,
Oklahoma.
Yeah, and a prominent black neighborhood that was destroyed by the whites, the white people around it who didn't want black people to have that kind of thing. They called it Black Wall Street, and they destroyed it. And I
Yeah.
don't remember how many people died, but it was
Several hundred.
catastrophic.
Yeah.
Not just the death toll, but the financial ramifications. So
Yep.
to go all the way back, slaves were freed. First of all, I know a lot of people probably don't realize that a lot of people probably just heard of Juneteenth
Yeah.
this year because
Yeah.
it was such a big deal was made about it.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that Juneteenth is actually a celebration of slaves that were freed 2 years after they were freed.
Yep. Yep. Because they didn't
Two
know.
years because
Yep.
their white owners wouldn't let them leave. They never told them that they could go.
Yep.
Then obviously the Jim Crow, all the Jim Crow laws, all the things that start happening.
Yep.
You know, black people couldn't. Well, first the government was supposed to give 40 acres a mule, and they never did.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you look at just that, when black people were freed, and if they were all given their own land, 40 acres and a mule, and allowed to begin to build something, some of them wouldn't. Some of them squandered because that's what people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them would have absorbed the farms of the other 40 acres of the people around them, and they would have built their own working farms, their own corporations, would have changed generations, and it really would have created equality. That didn't happen.
No. So
they had to go back, and a lot of them had to go back and work for the slave owners that they were working for pennies so they could eat.
Yep. So let's talk about a little bit of that, right? So Civil War comes, you know, United States of America defeats the Confederate States of America.
Yeah.
You know, all this stuff. Black people actually, right at that time, became very successful, right? Because you had to vote, right? Most of the people in the South were black. So black people were winning elections. There were black people running districts. That's when redlining came in. That's when
getting ready to get to redlining.
Yeah, absolutely. Because now it's like, wait a minute, black people run all these. No. Let's make them one district, big one district, but now they got one representative instead of all these 20 districts where, you know, they got 20 people that can vote and make a difference and control some things. So part of that started then, and we got into the Jim Crow. We got into more legalized segregation. I mean, it was bad because right after the Civil War, things were actually getting pretty good. Like you said, people, I mean, you know, rural farming, that's always going to be what that is. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of school education, right? You're working on a farm. That's hard work. You're going to get farming education, which is phenomenal, right? So it's going to be a lot of people out there who can farm, who know how to grow stuff, who know how to deal with animals, who understands the seasons and crop rotations and all those kinds of things. Super smart people, but academically they're not going to college, right? Not most people. They're working hard. They're building, like what you said. They're building life. They're building how to feed their family, right? But there are some smart people out there. There are some people who are educated. There are some people who are teaching themselves to read and write and do all these things. So, you know, there was a lot of growth in that time in the South. There really was. And a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like that because people, like I said, were winning elections. There were people running districts that thought, like, wait a minute, you know, this whole state is like 90% black. we got to divide that up, or that county, you know, large population. Oh, no. We got to fix that. We can't have all these black people in government making decisions. No. We can't have that. So some of that started then too. And that's why I said now I don't know how much better it really is, because it's always that same power dynamic. That has never changed, you know. Yep. And I'm not saying this about everybody, but for people who have always been in power, right? Power is a drug, and you always trying to stay in power, right?
Right.
I mean, so once they get there, they're going to do anything they can to keep it. They're going to lie, cheat, steal, kill, whatever they got to do to stay in power. And they don't want to let that go. And they're not trying to share it. They're not trying to share it with you. They definitely ain't trying to share it with me.
Right.
So, the only thing there is, to keep control over what you can control. And that's what they do. And in this, as long as that exists, there's never going to be equality.
Yeah.
Because they won't allow it. Because
Oh.
it steps on their power, their prestige, their entitlement. What are we talking about? Manifest destiny. God has said, "This is our right to be over everybody." Don't know that God said that, but if that's what you want to say,
Yeah.
and I will tell you, and I know one of the topics wasn't this, but religion has been one of the biggest tools used to keep Africans in their place. Period.
Yeah. Well,
Period.
Poor people in general.
Right.
But
right.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's and that, which is another episode, because
that's a whole nother.
Because I'm a huge religious history fanatic. I know so much about that, and it's and I'm a big proponent of religion. So I'm all over the place. People, conservatives think I'm liberal, and liberals think I'm conservative, and religious people think I'm but I'm just pretty balanced. I try to learn as much as I can to figure things out. One thing we haven't touched on yet is the private prisons and the systemic racism, the systemic growth of the private prisons.
Oh yeah.
I don't think people realize that. I don't think people understand. They know what it is and what's going on, and it all started back in the war on drugs. I think Nixon, in the Nixon administration, there's an admission that they were going to pass laws that they were going to and start using campaigns that they were going to slander the hippies and the blacks. And the war on drugs started with heroin for the hippies and marijuana at that time for the blacks, allegedly. And that evolved through the 70s into the broken window policy in the early 80s, which the broken window policy, for people who don't know, is that it's the theory, or allegedly the theory, that if you get a young person who breaks a window when they're young and you arrest them, that you can rehabilitate them so they won't break laws later on down the road. Okay, so we have the war on the hippies and the blacks, the war on drugs against the hippies and the blacks early, then the broken window policy where we start locking a bunch of young men up. Then the CIA, it's no secret, it's declassified. The CIA starts bringing crack cocaine into black neighborhoods in the early to mid 80s. Creates that whole epidemic where violence rises in the 90s to the highest point it's been. It's since gone down. And now you take all these people of color, a lot of people, a lot of poor people, a disproportionate amount of people, men of color, and you lock them up into these what are now private prisons that corporations are making money. They have to have quotas. They have to have so many people in the prison that's in the contract. And now these prisons sell their labor to other corporations, so they don't have to go to China. They can do it right here for the same cost. It's legalized slavery.
Absolutely.
And it's happening right now. People need to understand it's happening right this second.
And I think it happened before then, though, to be honest. I think one of the reasons why, like, we saw chain gangs and stuff like that in the South. Now, I don't know how the Midwest was and the Northeast and out West was, but in the South, you saw a lot of chain gangs, right? So they did a lot of road work for states, right?
Yeah, good point.
And I forgot. I have to do a little more research on this, so the next time we had this conversation. But they were essentially doing the same thing then, arresting people for some of the pettiest stuff. And I think that's when we started talking about bail, right? Because if you couldn't pay bail, you had to stay in jail. So even if you were arrested, not tried, not convicted, just arrested on suspicion of X, you couldn't pay bail, you stayed in jail.
Right.
Oh, now we got free labor, right?
Yeah.
So I think it started way back then, but now it's definitely monetized in a way this extremely profitable for prisons, right? Because why would a prison be a private industry? Why is that even the industry at all, right? So yes, that is modern day slavery in America. Absolutely.
Who
And
has the highest incarceration rate in the world?
yeah, have you seen the 13th?
I have.
Yeah. Okay.
I have.
So another great thing to look at for people who may not know about that, but it's about the 13th Amendment and what was it? Stop and frisk and some other kind of policies that they had that they were just arresting people.
Yeah.
Like you said, marijuana in the black community, first time offense, non-violent, 20 years. What?
And, and
What?
we both know that when you go into the criminal justice system,
Oh yeah,
the
you're right.
odds of you being rehabilitated
Yeah,
are very slim.
yeah,
It turns petty criminals into career criminals.
yeah. It's not a rehabilitation. And the funny thing now, and this is the irony of all of this. Now marijuana is legal.
And there are
Now
people still
marijuana,
locked up for it.
right? Now, so marijuana was a Schedule One drug. So worse than cocaine, worse than heroin, the worst drug out there. So they could arrest black people. And now corporations are running marijuana farms. And it's only a handful of corporations running marijuana farms. It's not everybody. Me and you, if you wanted to have a cannabis dispensary, you might have a better shot than me getting it,
In
but
Florida,
not really.
in Florida, it's a $60,000 non-refundable application fee.
Right, right. So if you don't
If
have the
that
money to
doesn't
get
alleviate
in,
a certain group of people, I don't know what does.
right, right. So now you can't even get into the game. So it's only a handful of companies even running it.
That's right.
That's
And now
that's
they
that's
figured
what you
out a
call
way.
systemic racism.
But it really goes back. I mean, really, it's disproportionately affects people of color, but it really goes back to the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They've taken a way to take a plant that grows out. I can't even grow
Yep.
a plant in my backyard,
Yep. Yep.
but I can go down the street and buy it from someone who already had enough money to open a store to
Mm-hmm.
make more money.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
people are grateful for it. That's what blows my mind about the whole thing. People are grateful they can go down the store and buy marijuana when they should be pissed they can't grow it in their backyard because it's a natural plant with healing properties.
It's phenomenal.
That is systemic right there. People need
Yes. Yes.
throw the word racism out.
Yep.
If you
Yep.
look at the fact that the system has people still in prison for
Yep.
something they've now legalized
Yep.
that grows naturally that you can't grow naturally, and now you're grateful because you can go buy it from them, that's the system screwing you over right there.
Yep.
Without a doubt.
I mean, it's too easy. It's too easy.
Too easy.
We just serve them up and they spike them. I mean, this is too easy. People act like none of this stuff exists. So it exists every day,
I just don't think
all day.
people just don't. I think people are busy, and I think people are busy, and they're inherently good, and they're inherently stressed because life is stressful, and people don't think about these things. That's why people watch their favorite news channel that
Mhm.
reinforces what they believe, because it's hard to go an extra step. It's hard to think about something else. People want to feel good about themselves, and when someone on TV tells them what they want to hear, then they're validated, and now they do feel good about themselves. And but it's creating a huge problem. That's why education is so important, and I know you agree with me on that.
Yeah,
The war on education right now is scary. Is really, really, really scary.
You know, growing up, and I mean, you're probably kind of like me in this. America, we prided ourselves on education.
Yeah.
And sending our kids to school and making sure they get the best education they could. I mean, even in the black community, when we had segregation and all these things, and we couldn't go to the quote unquote best universities, so we created our own and started getting college educated and doing all these things. And it was a very prideful thing to go to college and keep learning and educating yourself. And now it's like America puts no money in education. If you don't go to some $30,000 private school, good luck. And so again, haves and have-nots, and who are the haves and who are the have-nots? Because public schools aren't what they used to be. Because public school was never a problem before. I don't know when public school became such a pariah, and private school was the only way. I just don't know that. But it happened at some point in time. And now, if you don't go to hoity-toity private school, good luck.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous because I'm not paying $30,000 a year for my child if I had a child, that young to go to first grade. Are you serious? ABC 1, 2, 3, and I got to pay $30,000 for that? No, no, I'm not doing that. So
well, and another problem with schools is that we're focusing on memorization rather than critical thinking.
Oh yeah. Oh well, yeah. That's
if you teach a person to think critically, they'll figure everything out.
Yep, absolutely.
You don't need them to memorize. They'll learn and they'll figure it out. But we're not doing that. We're just it's constant memorization. And
that's all it is. That is all it is. Memorization.
Boy, we need critical thinking now.
Man, we got so many topics we could cover. Oh my God. So many topics.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. We're about 90 minutes into it, man. It's been a great discussion. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I know there are a lot of things we didn't get to cover, but I think we dove into a few things pretty good, and I think we got a little sidetracked a couple times, but that's all right because those were all good things that needed to be touched on. And
well, we'll talk about all those later, so that's a reason for anybody listening to subscribe and come back and check it out later, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I look forward to the next time we get on here and have this, and hopefully we'll stay a little closer to the agenda.
Yeah, well, I think I might have mentioned this to you. I have a small group of men with a lot of varying political opinions and different backgrounds, different education backgrounds, that I'm trying to put together and do a special podcast once a month with just these guys and have an open discussion of varying opinions about men's topics. And I'd like to have you be a part of that from time to time.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'd love to sit in on that and listen and learn and share. No, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know when that. I'd like to do one soon, so I'll let you know.
Okay, awesome. Good.
All right, Tim, man, I appreciate it. Great talk, and we'll do it again soon.
All right, Brad, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the next time, and hopefully we can finish this one up and move on to some of those other things we brought up.
Yeah, we will for sure. So, all right, man, I appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
To take a quick second to thank you for your support. If you wanted to learn more about what I do, you can find more information at www.thebradleyhall.com. You can find me on social media at The Bradley Hall. Find me on YouTube as The Health Preacher. If there's something you'd like me to cover on the show, you'd like me to talk about, please drop us a line and let me know. You can find that information on any of those outlets that I just gave you. And please remember to like, share, subscribe, and tell all your friends. Thanks.